this second part of the 400 response code series, we'll discuss the codes from 410 until 418. If you're interested in the other 400 codes, you can check them in either Part 1 for 400 to 409 or Part 3 for the 420 and higher. The 410 gone message indicates that a resource used to be available but has now been removed. This particular response probably isn't going to be used very often because if you remove the resource, most of the time you'd probably just end up with 404 not found. The 410 was created as a way to indicate that while the server is aware of the resource at one point, it knows that it's now gone. The demo is quite simple. Suppose we had some promotional offer on a website and we wanted to indicate that the promotion is now over. I've configured Nginx in this case to return a 410 under this particular URL. Again, this probably isn't going to be used that often, but it is here, and it could be useful for certain types of applications. The 411 length required seems like a pretty obvious response code, so let's give it a shot. Doing a standard post operation on a route with the URL form encoded body works fine, and you would think that if we simply remove the content length, then obviously we'll get the 411 response code. Unfortunately, we end up getting back a 200 OK. You see, when you do a post without a content length, the length is assumed to be 0, so nothing actually gets sent even if there happens to be a body. The 412 precondition failed is a response to a conditional request where the if match or if unmodified sense request headers cannot be fulfilled. Browsers would be using these if they were attempting to use cached versions of the pages. In this example, we requested the slash route initially and we got back an e-tag value. Then we'll do a second request containing an if match header, but we'll stick in a random value that certainly doesn't match the e-tag of the first request. The server responds with a 412 because, of course, the condition simply cannot be handled. Most servers have limits on how much data that they're willing to accept, and the 413 content too large code is a response that it will send back if the request comes in and it is simply too large. The actual size that makes something too large is completely configurable on the server itself. We'll do a simple request first with 15 bytes just to make sure that the server is working. The result is a PHP output from a print R showing the posted values. I configured Nginx to have a very small max body size of only 20 bytes, so let's add another 10 bytes to the message to see what happens. This time we get a request entity too large. Of course, a real server is likely to have multiple megabytes set as the actual size limit. Just like the 413 content too large, the server can also reject requests if the URI is simply too long. For example, if we do a request here with about 9,000 characters in the path, the Nginx is, I think, configured by default to only accept around 8 kilobytes worth of data in the URI. So yeah, we get back the 414 URI Too Long method. I don't think this is one that you'd actually bump into very often, but okay, we're covering everything, so this is yet another one that we've done. The response code 415 is issued by web applications if the content type of the uploaded data doesn't match one of the expected formats. Obviously, if a web application is expecting JSON, and the client uploads an image file, we have a bit of a problem. To demonstrate, let's use Postman to do a post, and we'll see that it actually gets back a 415 code. That's because this application has been configured to only accept JSON data. The 416 error code is generated by the server when the client happens to ask for part of the server's response, but the range provided is simply beyond the length of the actual response. To demonstrate, we're going to go into the manual web client and ask for the slash route. First, we'll do a normal request. Next, we'll add a range from bytes 0 through 20, which of course will give us only the first 20 bytes of the response. Finally, let's ask for the bytes in the range of 300 to 400. This returns a 416, because, of course, well, there's only 205 bytes in the actual response. The 417 expectation failed is used when the server is unable to comply with a request containing an expect header. Let's use the manual web client again to create a normal post operation, but let's include an expect header, but instead of the 100 continue like we're supposed to be putting in, let's ask for a 200 OK. This is of course not actually going to happen. The 418 HTTP response code, I'm a Teapot, is actually an Easter egg included in the specification, basically as part of an April Fool's joke. The joke was that somebody might try to use the HTTP protocol to trigger a coffee pot to make a cup of coffee, but it turned out that the actual device it was connected to was really a teapot. The code has no real purpose otherwise. The 419 response code is a non-standard HTTP response code, but we do see it in the world of PHP, specifically under Laravel. Laravel forces all forms to include CSRF tokens, and if you end up with an expired CSRF token, then it generates one of these response codes. It's not something that you're likely to see very often, but if you're working on a Laravel site, you might actually see this code.